the perfect trap. On a scorching Tuesday afternoon in rural Texas, Dr. Evelyn Hayes was driving home from a joyful visit with her sister's kids. The modest sedan hummed along the lonely highway, classic country music playing softly in the background. For those precious 3 days, she had been just Aunt Evelyn, making pancakes and playing video games, not the director of a major federal agency. But her peaceful drive was about to turn into a nightmare that would expose a shocking corruption scandal in law enforcement. Suddenly, flashing lights appeared in her rearview mirror, and her heart sank. She knew she hadn't been speeding, she was driving 43 in a 45 zone. Yet, as she pulled over to the dusty shoulder, a sense of dread washed over her. 2 officers stepped out of their cruiser, and Evelyn immediately noticed their positioning. Officer Miller approached her window while his younger partner, Officer Crow, positioned himself near her trunk, right in her blind spot. This was a classic pincer move, not typical for a routine traffic stop. "Good afternoon, officer. Is there a problem?" Evelyn asked, keeping her voice calm and respectful as she lowered her window halfway. Miller didn't answer right away. His eyes crawled over her face, taking in every detail with an invasive stare that made her skin crawl. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold. "License and registration. You drifted over the line back there." "I don't believe I did," Evelyn replied evenly, handing over her documents. Alarm bells rang in her mind. She hadn't drifted anywhere, and they both knew it. Miller took her license, and she watched his eyes linger on her name. "Hayes," he mumbled, then nodded to Crow. "I'm going to need you to pop the trunk," Miller ordered. Evelyn's training kicked in. "Is that a request or a lawful order based on probable cause?" Crow's hand drifted down to his baton. "You got something to hide in there, ma'am?" Evelyn could see exactly what they were doing, pushing for a reaction, hoping she'd get angry or scared enough to give them an excuse. But she had spent years in federal law enforcement, she wouldn't give them that satisfaction. "I know exactly what's in my trunk," she stated firmly. "And I know my rights." Miller's voice turned sharp. "You comply now, or we do this the hard way." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn knew the game was rigged, but refusing would only escalate the situation. Against her better judgment, she pressed the trunk release. The soft click echoed in the desert silence like a gunshot. Crow disappeared to the back of her car, and Evelyn steeled herself. Her instincts screamed that this was no ordinary traffic stop. It was an ambush. A moment later, Crow reappeared, holding a clear plastic bag filled with white powder. His smug grin could have lit up the entire highway. Whoa. What do we have here?" he said, his voice dripping with fake surprise. Evelyn met his gaze in the rearview mirror, her voice steady. "That is not mine." "Are you sure about that?" Crow sneered. "I am absolutely certain." Miller leaned closer to her window, his breath stale with coffee. "You're a long way from D.C., ma'am. Out here, things can get real uncomfortable for people who like to argue." But Evelyn had faced down cartel leaders and international drug traffickers. 2 corrupt small-town cops weren't going to intimidate her. "I know my rights," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I do not consent to this search, and I am requesting legal representation immediately." Miller's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. "You hear that, Crow? We got ourselves a law professor. Guilty people sure do talk a lot." "I'm not guilty," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "And if you were confident in your case, you wouldn't need to hide behind insults." That's when Miller's mask slipped, revealing the real monster underneath. His face hardened. "That tone of yours," he murmured, narrowing his eyes. "You think you're someone special. Out here, people learn quick that a badge means you follow orders." But Evelyn didn't flinch. "Then I suggest you follow the law yourself. Get your supervisor on the radio. Now." For a split second, pure fury flashed across Miller's face. The sheer audacity of this woman telling him how to do his job. "Get out of the car," he ordered, his voice a low growl. "No," she replied firmly. "Not without a supervisor present. You have no cause for arrest, and you are holding narcotics that you did not find in my car." Miller's rage boiled over. With a snarl, he wrenched her car door open, grabbing her by the arm and hauling her from the vehicle. Crow moved in, shoving her against the side of her car. The scorching metal seared through her shirt as they cuffed her with deliberate cruelty. "Not so tough now, are you?" Crow hissed, but even as they shoved her toward their patrol car, Evelyn kept her back straight and her chin held high. "This is illegal," she said, her voice shaking with controlled rage, not fear. "I have offered no resistance. That powder was not in my trunk. I demand your badge numbers." They shoved her into the back of the cruiser without a word. Through the dirty glass, she watched passing cars slow down, their drivers' faces a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. They saw what they were supposed to see, a routine arrest. They didn't see two corrupt officers enacting a cruel piece of theater. What Miller and Crow didn't know was that their victim had just activated a chain of events that would bring down their entire criminal empire. The police station smelled like stale coffee and industrial cleaner. The death sergeant, a man whose face sagged with boredom, took Evelyn's details without making eye contact. "Possession, obstruction," he mumbled, his pen scratching across a standard form. Then he turned to his computer terminal and began typing. "Hayes, Evelyn." His fingers slowed. He leaned closer to the screen, his eyes narrowing in confusion. A flag had appeared on his monitor, then another, and another. The sergeant's posture straightened as boredom melted away, replaced by confusion, then disbelief, then pure terror. The screen flickered, displaying an official government photograph next to a title that made the air leave his lungs. Director, Drug Enforcement Administration. Classification, Level 5, immediate federal contact required. The sergeant went pale as a ghost. "Ma'am, we didn't know," he stammered, reaching for the phone. "I need to get a secure line right now." But Evelyn Hayes was already taking control. "Put the phone down," she commanded, her voice quiet but carrying the force of a battering ram. "Secure this building. Freeze all internal network access. Seal the surveillance records for the booking desk and the Sally port. Every log from every squad car is now federal evidence." Less than an hour later, her team arrived in black SUVs with federal plates. The entire station was locked down tighter than Fort Knox. But when they went to arrest officers Miller and Crow, they discovered something chilling. The two corrupt cops had vanished into thin air. While Miller and Crow fled like rats from a sinking ship, they left behind a trail of evidence that would seal their fate forever. The bag of white powder they had planted contained a federal tracking code linking it directly to a high-profile cartel bust from 6 months earlier. They hadn't just framed a random woman, they had used the government's own evidence to do it. With the full force of the DEA at her command, Evelyn began ripping open the department's records like a surgeon performing an autopsy. What she found wasn't just corruption, it was a hunting ground. Dozens of cases targeting minority drivers, all with mysteriously corrupted or missing body camera footage, all following the same pattern Miller and Crow had tried to use on her. But then she found something that made her blood run cold. His name was Leo Gibson, a 22-year-old with a bright smile and dreams of becoming a teacher. According to the official report, he had died by suicide in police custody 2 years earlier. His family had fought for answers, filing lawsuit after lawsuit, but they were stonewalled at every turn. The report was just one page, a brief narrative painting Leo as unstable and violent. But Evelyn knew how to read between the lines. Hidden in a corrupted file folder, she found it, a bystander's cell phone video that had somehow survived the department's cover-up attempts. The footage was grainy but crystal clear in its horror. It showed Miller and Crow beating Leo Gibson into unconsciousness while he begged for his life. What the official report called suicide was actually cold-blooded murder disguised as standard procedure. Evelyn had to step outside and take deep breaths of desert air. In all her years of law enforcement, she had seen evil in many forms, but this level of calculated cruelty shook her to her core. The hunt for Miller and Crow became a federal manhunt. Through witness interviews and seized records, a horrifying picture emerged. Miller and Crow weren't just rogue cops. They were foot soldiers in a corruption network spanning 5 police departments across 3 counties. An informant revealed the scope of the rot. The operation had a name, the Sentinel Protocol, designed to make seized drugs disappear from evidence lockers and reappear on the black market. But the real shock came when they identified the mastermind behind it all, Arthur Finch, a disgraced former DEA agent who had supposedly died in a car accident 3 years earlier. Except Arthur Finch wasn't dead. He had faked his own death and was now living as a ghost, the architect of a criminal empire stretching across half of Texas. The hunt ended in a desolate corner of the Texas desert where Miller and Crow had holed up in an abandoned ranch house, thinking they could wait out the heat. When the DEA tactical team descended at dawn, Evelyn was right there at the front. The moment of recognition on Miller and Crow's faces, realizing the woman they had tried to frame was now holding their lives in her hands, was chilling. They surrendered without firing a shot, probably realizing their situation was hopeless. Arthur Finch proved to be a different challenge. They found him not in hiding but living in plain sight in a quiet Austin suburb. His house looked ordinary, but inside it was a digital fortress. Banks of monitors glowed in the darkness, showing real-time surveillance feeds from police stations across Texas. When the federal agents breached his door, Finch didn't resist. He simply looked up at Evelyn with unsettling calm, the supreme arrogance of a man who believed he was untouchable. That arrogance turned out to be his final mistake. Evelyn's testimony before Congress wasn't just a speech, it was a precision weapon dismantling their entire criminal network piece by piece. She laid out the evidence methodically, the planted drugs, the murdered young man, the stolen evidence, the fake death, the network of corrupt officers. Each revelation hit like a thunderclap, and the calls for justice were deafening. In a packed courtroom, officers Miller and Crow stood pale and trembling as the judge delivered their sentences. Life in prison for the murder of Leo Gibson, decades more for their role in the corruption network. Their reign of terror was finally over. Arthur Finch, the untouchable mastermind, was led into a supermax facility in shackles. But Evelyn wasn't finished yet. The Sentinel protocol was burned to the ground, its ashes scattered to the wind. In its place, a new system was created, fully transparent with real-time oversight and accountability measures that would make future cover-ups impossible. It was called the Gibson Initiative, named after the young man whose life had been stolen, but whose death would now protect countless others. Police body cameras were upgraded with tamper-proof technology. Evidence handling procedures were completely overhauled. Civilian oversight committees were given real power to investigate misconduct. Most importantly, a federal task force was established to hunt down corruption networks before they could take root and destroy lives. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming, not even Evelyn herself. During the investigation, they discovered that Miller and Crow's targeting of her wasn't random. Arthur Finch had been monitoring federal communications and identified Dr. Hayes as a threat to his operation months earlier. The routine traffic stop was actually an assassination attempt, not to kill her, but to destroy her career and credibility by framing her for drug possession. That if she had been just any other person, the plan would have worked perfectly. Finch had been playing a game of chess while everyone else was playing checkers. But he made one crucial miscalculation. He underestimated how dangerous Evelyn Hayes could be when someone tried to destroy her life. Justice rarely arrives like a thunderclap. More often, it arrives with the slow, relentless persistence of good people who refuse to be silenced, no matter the cost. Leo Gibson's family finally got the answers they had been seeking for 2 years. The dozens of innocent people framed by Miller and Crow had their convictions overturned. The stolen evidence was returned to its rightful place, and somewhere in a federal prison, Arthur Finch sits in his concrete cell, probably still wondering how his perfect plan went so catastrophically wrong. The answer is simple: he picked the wrong woman to mess with. Sometimes the universe has a sense of justice that's more perfect than anything human beings could ever devise. Sometimes the person you think is your perfect victim turns out to be your worst nightmare. And sometimes 2 corrupt cops making what they thought was a routine traffic stop end up putting the final nail in their own coffins.